So we're in the middle of setting up some CircleCI stuff to do automatic deployments to GitHub pages. We've actually gotten pretty far. So at least right now, if we go to our build tab for Coffee Driven Dev, we can see here that we are successfully deploying, and we're skipping for some of these CNAME changes where the output is identical. So we're looking into a way to update the CNAME records for DreamHost, which is our DNS provider for our domains, our domain name provider. The problem is this www record, a record, won't go away, and it's supposed to when we switch to DNS only. So we'll see here if they have an online support. They used to. It looks like they tried to they used to be able to talk to them live, but it looks like you might not be able to anymore. At least not without a higher tier plan. So we're looking at different domains. Here are the ones that I own and play around with. And let's see here. Okay, so if we go to this, we can see these have been flipped to DNS only. And that should be all we need to do. So we did a forced DNS refresh here recently, so it might just take time, and that might be the unfortunate truth there. So we'll hop out of that, and we'll look at that more later. Maybe we'll just get back into playing with our actual stuff here. So close. Let's close some of these tabs. You can see this is starting to come along a little bit. Our README. Just that parked page. And we'll bookmark this because this seems to be a pretty good source of truth for what we're trying to accomplish. As does this. Slack message. Let's see what's up. So we're back on this. We're going to see if we can embed the Twitch player in that top right hand corner. So let's look into that. Okay, Twitch developers, embed. We don't want to embed everything. That might be overkill, but let's just get a look at it to see what it looks like anyway. So we have this script section here. This is what we need to load, and a placeholder for the Twitch embed. And that gives us some width and height. It's not dynamic. Okay, so it can be percentage. It has a minimum and default. So that minimum 400 is a fair amount bigger than what we're targeting. So I don't know if the full viewer is going to work for this specific spot, even though it's kind of a nice little attention grab. So let's see if we can use a smaller size for just the embedded chat or videos or clips. It looks like we may not have limitations for chat. So we have a recommended minimum for this one. So we can embed our live stream in this top right hand corner. Looks like we're capped at 300. I think that if we have to make it that large, it's not the end of the world. That'd still fit on mobile screens all right, given that most iPhones kind of cap around that 350 mark. So it looks like we can use just that. Non-interactive inline frames for live streams and VODs. It's interesting that they don't have the JavaScript interactive frames. There we go. That's what we want. Oh man, my Slack is blowing up today. Okay, so knowing that's what we want to change, let's minimize this for now. Let's pop this over here. You probably care less about the documentation. You'd probably rather see the code, so we'll throw that on the right. And we're looking here at probably just app. Close this. Let's just close everything and only open what we need. Let's open app.view. There we go. And let's look for, so that's coming in CDD top bar. Here's top bar. Here's our placeholder. So we'll probably eventually make this a custom component or a widget, so that way it's kind of its own thing. So let's see here. So there's an external source we want to include. I haven't really done this too often with Vue. Let's see how it handles it. I have a feeling it's not going to like it because it'll be included every time we have a top bar. So let's see if there's a better way to do that. Vue single file component. Okay, so you can pull it in via created. So we can return them as a promise. That makes sense. And then we can just execute code after they've been loaded. This is actually creating a script element on created. We're going to do that for now. Again, there's probably a better way to do this. So created as a method. When it gets fired, it's one of our lifecycle hooks. Okay, so we see right here that the URL we need to pull in. It's this guy right here. We'll set it as the source attribute, and we'll call this Twitch script. So we're modifying it, but I think const is fine. Those attributes just need to be constant. It's not necessarily the entire object itself. Source, document, head, append child. That's weird because it'll be literally appended every single time that this component is created. And it could be created multiple times. I guess it's in our main, so it's fine. But again, I still think there's a better way to load these scripts that are dynamic. But we'll give it a try just to see if we can get it working first before we do our refactor. So that'll happen on created. And after that script has loaded, we should be able to do kind of what this is calling for. So this image is going to go away. And instead we're going to put a placeholder element that will be our target for our embedded player. And then after that we're going to specify these options. So we have a few options. We can create the new Twitch player into that container. So width, we'll just do 400 by 400 for now. Let's see when you specify height in pixels. So these are the recommended minimums. Height 300, width 400. Channel ID. Man, I don't know what our channel ID is. Let's see if we can find it. Hey viewer, if you're sticking around, feel free to ask questions, or if there's anything you want to chime in on or see or learn more about, just ask away. Hey, we have a prime loot. Cool. But what is our channel name? I imagine it's this right here. So I actually don't want a video. So channel, video, or collection. I don't want either of these. You can have a trailing comma. Prettier sometimes yells at you. It's going to be mad because it doesn't know what that is. Let's see. Async, load, script, promise, then. So we should be able to do something like this. Load script async. So what we're trying to accomplish here is loading this with a promise, and then in the then, for that promise using that Twitch object that we're then going to have access to. Let's give this a try first. All right. It's probably giving us some kind of error. Let's see what it is. Twitch is not defined. Twitch is not defined. Network. Let's see if our sources were pulled in. So we have that. This is coming from player.twitch.tv. JS embed v1. So that's coming in. But again, because it's being loaded in this particular way, we may not have access to Twitch at that point in time. So let's see if we can do this in a smarter way. Load external source with promise. jQuery, see if there's an example of doing that. So that's not ideal. JS files. Dynamic loader API that I recommend that you use. So we're looking at dynamic, oh, hey PopLogix. Yeah, so we're looking at dynamic imports because we don't want to include our Twitch embed globally. So we want to be able to only pull it in when our component is created and then use the Twitch object it exposes to instantiate a new instance of our viewer in the top right hand corner here. And so now show the live feed when we are available on that website. So let's see if it can do URLs. Dynamic import external URL. How's your lunch going? Script.js you could use to accomplish this. I mean, I guess we could add a dependency to accomplish this. Not lunch yet. That's I don't know how legal that is, but I understand from like from the perspective of wanting to have your stuff done. Let's see. So this works all the way back to IE6. It's async JavaScript loading and dependency management. That sounds alright. So just go ahead and install and give it a try. So npm install -dev make script path. npm. It's a script.js async. Alright. So we're going to pause this and we're going to install this as a dependency. We'll do yarn add. Yarn saves by default. And it's just script.js. So then we should be able to import that. So again, eventually we're probably going to move this to its own module. Import cache script from script.js. No, X double quotes. This should give us the ability to async load that file in our created hook. So you could do old school, middle school load is non-blocking but has multiple dependents. New school, multiple, single. I think that'll make it available globally. Is there a .then version? It might just be .ready. .ready. So I'm not sure what the scope is for that global. But let's try it out. The Twitch API that I'm playing with allows me to embed a live stream, if that's what you're talking about. Script.js gives me the ability to get that external resource file and load it asynchronously so I can use the Twitch API to load that viewer. The problem is normally this would just be a script tag, and you'd include it somewhere on your site, but we only really want it included on any page that we intend to have the dynamic viewer on. So this is just kind of our way of managing that dependency. So a cheating way to do it is just to make sure that it's always available by including a script tag in our app.view. But then no matter what page you hit, for example, if you hit our about page, which has potentially bios on it, we'd have to load this script and it could be blocking before content could be rendered. So I guess if we want to cheat, we could just do this and it gets around us having to add a dependency. If I copy that, I look at public, I look at index, which is used to build our index, and I pop this at the bottom so that way it is non-blocking. I go to top bar. remove this. Look back at script.js if we need it. The problem is this Twitch is available globally. So you can add an ESLint. Let's see here. ESLint globals. You can kind of say that it is available globally. And then it won't give you those warnings. So let's see, globals. Yeah, so we can just create a new little chunk here, call it globals. And we're looking at Twitch. True. So then that should stop yelling at us. Unless I didn't specify it in the right place. No undefined rule. Alright, let's just give it a try and see if that fixed it to begin with. Let's give this a reload. Okay, we need to kick it back up. Starting. So PopLogix, we did get a little bit further with the CircleCI thing. So that's, if we go to CircleCI.com, we updated our deployment script, and we're now successfully deploying to GitHub pages on merges. And you can see a history of builds here. What we're waiting on is what we have our DNS entries through, DreamHost. We're waiting for them to drop our A-name record that's blocking us from creating a new C-name record that'll actually allow us to map our domain to our GitHub repository. So once that propagates, we should be able to view our website and have it auto-deploy on those merges a little bit more seamlessly. Okay, so localhost, refresh. There's this. Inspect. Getting all kinds of errors. So let's see here. Append child. No. Let's erase this to make sure we're still good. So it looks like this might be being called by a different library. So in created, our DOM actually doesn't exist yet. So we might want to actually move this to the mounted hook. Oh, still working on the transitions. I'm trying to figure out where they're... Oh. Cool. So that's working. So now we have that embed there. We'll probably try to position that, put some Chrome around it, have a link to jump to the actual stream, and then maybe also a subscribe button if they have an API for that. How are the transitions? So I'm still working on the transitions. But so I think we're going to remove these login and sign up URLs, and we're going to add some about pages. In the about pages, we'll probably do some transitions as we switch between the three of us that are kind of doing this. And then once we get the detail pages for this done, when we click these, we'll probably have this roll up as this content fades out, and we'll probably have these guys in this card kind of transition into their new detail positions. So the fact that we just don't have those multiple routes set up doesn't give us those page transitions yet. But we have the underlying code and the proof of concept done. Okay, so cool. I can watch myself. You can full screen myself. Let me close that. I can see that there's a decent amount of delay. I can mute settings. So this is just the Twitch player. Okay. So let's see here. Let's see if they have anything else we can embed. So we'll probably yarn remove that dependency. I guess I'm okay with, at least for now, having that there. So yarn remove script.js. And so I don't know if you noticed, but the issue was that we were trying to kind of inject this Twitch player in the created hook. And in the created hook, the DOM hasn't been created yet. It's kind of like a pre-DOM having been rendered. So a lot of times that's when you'll do your data requests and queue up all the data you need to bind your view to. But mounted is when you have access to all the DOM that's been generated. And if you need to hook into that or grab references or anything like that, that's where you're going to want to do it. And so that's why it was freaking out and throwing errors at us. So we'll do yarn run serve again. Get our demo back up. Okay. So I think 300 by 400 is good enough. It's just kind of cool to see that we are live. It's attention getty. We'll probably change that blue to be a darker blue. Yeah, it's bothering me a little bit. I actually like NPM more than yarn. I'm just using it on this project to get outside of my comfort zone. The big issues have been, they're very similar. So the reason yarn came out is because NPM isn't deterministic, or at least it used to not be deterministic. So you had this issue where if someone were to NPM install on their project, they might get slightly different results than you did if you NPM installed. And when you're talking about thousands of dependencies, it can make things really hard to troubleshoot and give you an unreliable kind of like bootstrapping of your project. So yarn created itself to be deterministic, and because it was deterministic, it could gain some performance advantages as well. And shortly thereafter, NPM kind of followed suit. I mean, that's the beauty of having a competitor in the same space, right? So NPM decided that it too was going to create its own package lock file that shows how those things are kind of dependent on each other, and use those when it ultimately generates those the same stuff on install. And in fact, NPM's improved on it a little bit further, where they now have a new command called npm-ci, which is for continuous integration, where if your dependencies are in sync with your package lock, you can kind of short circuit and not have to do as much logic in generating it, and you can decrease install times by about 33 to 66%. But again, that's mostly used on CI for check-ins to kind of speed up that process. If you are DevOps, one of the things you're constantly looking to do is to decrease the amount of time it takes to run anything in that realm. Because you want to be able to very quickly run tests, you want to be able to very quickly whatever, because sometimes that's what's holding up a developer, right? So if I push to GitHub and I want to merge something, a lot of times I have tests that need to run first. So instead of me walking away and grabbing a cup of coffee, it's nice if you can do something significantly faster, so you don't have that downtime. Kind of the whole, my code's compiling, so I'm going to hop on social media or on Twitch. But yeah, so they're very similar, especially in terms of performance today, and I'd say it's almost more personal preference than anything else at this point. But I think you will see that yarn has slightly better performance in some situations. I mean, you don't have to. If you've used one, you've kind of used the other. And if you look at either of their guides, they kind of compare themselves, so it's pretty easy to see how it translates. So for example, you can have, you might have npm install package name dash save. So the equivalent of that in yarn is just yarn add package name. So I mean, they're pretty similar, since they try to be like feature comparison one-to-one. You'll notice that a lot of their commands are just kind of similar. They have very similar APIs. Okay, so we're pulling this in, and I think we were just trying to see what else they have. So Twitch API embed. What other stuff do they have? What are drops? Oh. It's interesting how much of this is geared towards gamers rather than programming. I mean, even the channel we're in is supposed to be for a game, but it's the programming game. But I guess that makes sense. There's only one kind of programming, whereas there are hundreds and hundreds of games. So let's see here. Game developer analytics. So I can apparently generate a CSV. Games tab, data fields, new Twitch API, requests, webhooks. I love webhooks. API v5. deprecated. So the new Twitch API is what they're using. So I won't even look at this. Rate limits, webhooks, authentication. Okay. Embed Twitch follow button. Let's see. Twitch developer forums. I should probably sign up for that. Let's see, you got a text message real quick, probably from my wife. All good. Follow button on my website. I'm not sure if you can embed the same buttons on Twitch. Put call to. Okay. So that's interesting. Okay, so you can create your own follow button in Twitch, but you need to use their SDK. So that's a little more intense than we need to get right now, but we can look into it. But let's sign up for the Twitch Developer Forum. I think that'll be useful to have, because I think, if anything, we're going to want to leverage some of the more advanced capabilities to eventually set our channel apart. I feel like we could probably make some pretty unique interactions that maybe just your average Twitch video game streamer might not be able to accomplish. So I see there are a few more people on right now than normal. If you have any questions or if there's anything you want to see, feel free to get at me. So we're mostly doing Vue.js stuff, some GitHub automated CI stuff with CircleCI, but I do a whole breadth of stuff, so feel free to just ask away. Create a new account. Okay, activation email. I'm not gonna, well, let me do that down here so you guys can't see it. Yeah, so they're also pointing, but that's in V5. So you can do a follow channel call in their API. So the new Twitch API, follow, webhooks guide, webhooks reference, status, authentication, requests. That's fine, but where's the actual API information? I wonder if you need to sign in to see it. Sign in now that we have an account. All right, it's activated. Nice. Cool. Get started. It's the same page. Okay, but where are the docs? So you can create a new app, you can register it. So you'd register your website as an application. It looks like you can request some kind of token. So you'd need to use that server side, not client side. So that's outside the current scope of what we're working on. Yeah, so you need it unique for each application, and you probably want it hidden so that way no one can just snab your ID from your client code. You can apparently gain user access, so if PopLogix was on our website, they could technically authenticate with our website as a Twitch app, and they could ultimately do actions that would affect their profile from our website. Yeah, so we'll bookmark this, and so I'm going to add this as a goal for our channel. Let's see here. Let's go to Twitch. Let's go to our channel. We're going to modify our goals. registered Twitch app. It's just some markdown to make sure that it's hyperlinked. Now that's saved, we can close this panel and we should be able to see that that's still there. So we'll hop out of this because it's going to mess up our viewer count if I'm just hiding in there. Close that. Again, we have this. Okay. So I think we're just going to include a link to the channel underneath, and we'll probably bump it down a little bit. So we'll give it some padding. So let's create a new component though, so that way we're not polluting this existing component. So we'll call it our Twitch player view. Base, scaffold it. Go to top bar. Pull it in as a single file component. We're not passing anything, so we'll do that for now. Oh, hey, Writer Dev. Thanks for following. If you have any questions, feel free to ask away. If there's anything you want to see or talk about. So we're going to import that Twitch player that we just created. .view. Let's look at this. So here's our template for it. It really is pretty simple. It really just kind of is an inject spot. So that Twitch player is going to find that ID and it's going to inject what it needs to do. Alright, so let's go back to top bar. So you can see we're popping it in right there. We just need to make sure it's available in our list of components. And we need to make sure this mounted information right here is moved to that component as well. So we'll do set a name for it. And it is just our Twitch player as the mounted hook. Let's fix it with prettier. Alright. Let's see if this breaks. So we should be fine then. It looks like that worked. Again, though, we should have a way to... I think we just modified our wrong ESLint. We'd be able to set a global so that way it doesn't give us a warn for that. So we'll close tests. We have a higher level ESLint that applies to more of our project. Let's do this. Globals. Let's see if that fixed it. Yeah, so see, it's no longer giving us a... what is this project? So you can go look at it. We're just playing with what it's eventually going to be, kind of like a small website that talks about me and two other hosters and some videos we've done in series, quick clips, mostly educational around full stack web development. Most of the front end is going to be Vue. Most of the back end is going to be .NET Core. Some DevOps stuff, either TeamCity, CircleCI, and then just some medium education posts along that same realm. And then also just some UX stuff. Most of them are just insights kind of gleaned from Sugar. But you can see this particular project on GitHub. And I'll post a link to it here in a hot second. So here's the organization. The repo we're specifically playing with is this one right here. GitHub Pages is still in the process of being set up. We're just waiting on some DNS stuff to propagate. But we're using, again, CircleCI to kind of automate the on-merge that we deploy to GitHub Pages. And right now it's mostly just a Vue project using Vue CLI 3.0 and the progressive web app and a couple of other the built-in CLI plugins. And if you have any specific questions about any of that, let me know. A lot of the architecture insights we're taking away are from the Vue Enterprise boilerplate that's kind of maintained by Chris Fritz, who's the head guy for documentation for all the Vue projects. Let's see here. Hope that answered your question. All right, so now that we have this here, let's hop back in top bar. Let's move our graphic container a little bit. Display flex. We'll give it some, position it. I'll push it down a little bit. Probably do a little bit more than that. I guess we only really care about margin top though, so we'll do 25 top, right, bottom, left. And kind of remember, it kind of goes around a clock, right? So if you're ever specifying like a margin or padding top, right, bottom, left, and that's the easy way to remember it. If you're doing 2 properties, I believe it's top, bottom, and then right, left. And I know there's a way to do 3. I just can't remember which properties are being set in that instance. Okay, so we have this here. So we'll probably just throw a hyperlink underneath that actually takes us to the Twitch stream. Watch on Twitch. So it looks like it already does it, but we might want like a more pronounced call to action, right? So unless you're used to seeing that player all the time. So I'd argue that both are pretty lean, Vue and React. I just think it's easier to get started with Vue if you've already done some traditional web development, just because you're just using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Whereas with React, you have to learn that RxJS or that reactive JS stuff where you have CSS in JavaScript. So it's a little bit of a shift mentally to kind of understand. But I think they're really, really comparable, especially once you master that concept in React. There's not a ton of differences. I think React may actually have a little bit more flexibility than Vue does in some of its APIs that allows you to accomplish a little bit more. But I think for the most part, unless you have a crazy intense use case, they'll both work for you. But yeah, Vue's pretty easy to get started with, and if you haven't already, I'm not sure if the docs currently point to this or not, but the Vue CLI allows you to scaffold a project really quickly, and it gives you a ton of really good options, so you can kind of start at whatever level you need to. So if you think you're going to need routing logic, or if you think you're going to need that central data store, or if you think you're going to need it to be a progressive web app, or if you want linting, or if you want end-to-end tests, it gives you the option to add or remove all those, and it will generate a starter project for you with a lot of the configuration already in place. Because if not, I think that's probably the hardest part of setting up a modern project today, is all that configuration. And that's fine. Yeah, I think people that really, really like and really, really get JavaScript kind of move more towards React, because everything is kind of just a function, and you're just passing around different render functions. And so it can be really powerful, and there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do because of that. At the same time, at least for me, it's harder to parse. It's really nice for me to think of just, again, the Vue single file component is you have your HTML template, you have your JavaScript that defines your component, and you have your CSS, and it's just nesting and reusing components as much as you want. And that's kind of all there is to it. Okay, Django's cool. You actually find that a lot of Vue developers are Laravel or PHP developers, which is interesting. Kind of similar to how you'll find that a lot of Angular developers are actually .NET developers. It's interesting to see what backend languages kind of lean people towards one framework or another. So pause by default, that's good. Let's see here. So let's see if I can find any images of a Twitch follow button so we can kind of steal his styling. That's a pretty good image we can probably emulate. Let's see if we can find the Twitch logo somewhere. Either SVG or PNG would be nice. Brand. Okay, so there's the Twitch purple. They make this really nice. All these guidelines. Let's see here. Downloadable logo assets. So I think we're probably going to want it with a purple outline, and we're going to have it on that. I don't know. So right here, it's a purple button. They have this, but we don't want that with the blue outline on our site, right? And I think we're actually going to change our blue to a darker blue. No, Python's really powerful, especially if you start getting into some of the data scientist stuff. Yeah, they have that whole Anaconda suite of libraries. That's really nice. And I think you're seeing a lot of places kind of double down on their commitment to Python with the advent of 3.7. So now I think that's a good way to go. I don't know too many full-time Python devs around here, but most of them kind of are data scientists. And I'm located in Ohio or the Midwest. Let's go here. Global. Let me see if I can find the logo that we were thinking about using. We're kicking up slack. You just in an off screen, so you can't quite see it. All right, so I'm pretty sure the logo that we're going for. Here we go. I really just want to steal the hex color from it. I'm fairly bad at just picking colors. I have a couple of apps that help me make sure that they don't clash too badly. Let's see. Sean, William, here we go. You're all just waiting for me to show it. Anticipation is building. You don't know what you're going to do with yourselves. Alright, so I think this is what we're looking at. So I can't wait to get the actual hex colors. But let's see here. I probably have some kind of tool I can use to steal that. Copy image URL. Eyedropper. There we go. So that's copied to clipboard. So this is one of probably my favorite color swatch websites. It's coolers.co. If I type it in right and it doesn't take us to a website where we buy cars. There we go. Alright, start the generator. So this is really good for building complementary swatches. Okay. So this is the blue we're looking at. So let's go ahead and steal this. Let's replace it with the hex blue we had been using. Let's see how that updates. So it's a little bit darker. Okay, so what other colors do we want to use? So if this is selected and then this color is locked, pressing spacebar will kind of generate these other ones. And it has a bunch of really nifty functions where you can pull in alternative shades, and when you click it, it'll kind of snap to that shade. You can modify the hue, RGB, CMYK, pick. You can do sets, all kinds of stuff. And then you also just have the ability to move these slides around after you've locked them. So I really like this. Pick colors from an image. You can toggle on color blindness to see how things look in different color blindness. Toggle alternative shades for all of them. Adjust your entire palette. And you can export and save. And you can see that the URLs that are generated, each one of these is just the hex value separated by a dash. And so it's pretty intuitive, the URL structure as well for using coolers. So let's go ahead and generate some more though. Let's find some colors that don't look awful together. I'll probably just end up being like 6 shades of blue. I'm unfortunately really into blue. Let's see. That's an interesting color. Let's pop that over here. Beige, I guess. Might use that for something. There's 5 people right now watching me pick colors. That's kind of weird if you think about it. That's the kind of stuff that when you go with your significant other to the store, you kind of put off. We're like wedding planning together now as a group. Let's see. Lavender blush. So there's this really interesting thought where if you pick a primary color like blue that you're going to be using over and over and over, that a lot of your muted colors should incorporate a dash of that. And the thought process is that it kind of ties them in together than if you were to use something that didn't have a blue hue to it. So there's a darker blue. So again, we could tinge this a little bit, this background right here, to kind of bring it in. So if we grab this, let's see what color we're currently using, because it's not part of a color variable right now. It might just be our whole body's background. So then we'll make this primary. So we'll need to change those blues to primary. So it's going to yell at us because it can't find that blue color variable. So we'll do a control find. And so again, we could use a color map to make these a little bit easier to pull out or organize them a little bit better. Just like kind of like key value pairs. Or you could have a color map that has like 4 or 5 different kinds of blue, and you could specify which particular shade you want to use or pull in. And that's just one of the advantages of kind of using Sass. And so on our body and app background. So let's see if we can find a version of this that has a little bit more blue in it, right? So that makes it a little bit bluer. The green. The red, and you can see we're starting to inch towards blue, lavender, glitter. All right, and that might be over the top. We'll leave it as is for right now. Alright, so again we have this video player here, we have this. Let's look into making these actual links instead of just the buttons that they are. So this, because it's bold like this, it kind of looks like it's our primary CTA. So we have to think about when people come to our website, what do we want them to do? Right now, it's, hey, here's what we're doing, here's what we have done, and here's how you can easily kind of get to all of that content. So let me scaffold these out. So that way you have a few more to kind of see what that could look like, where these are kind of like those primary images, and then these are categories. And then medium posts, I'm not entirely sure what I want that to look like yet. So we probably want a CTA here, a newsletter sign up here, about us here, and what's our primary action. Honestly, we probably want you to jump to our Twitch channel. We're not trying to monetize anything at this point, but that would be a really good point where we could say, hey, here's where you could sign up for our educational series. Hey, here's where you could sign up for paid mentorship. Hey, here's where you could sign up for X, Y, or Z. It really just depends on where we decide to take things. So we'll modify those top links real quick. So those are again in top bar. A little quiet in the room. Yeah, so again, feel free to, if you want to see me do anything, I only have a couple more minutes left in lunch, but I might be on later again today. But again, for the most part, consistently on during lunchtime. All right, so button, About us. Cool. You'll see that we're doing that text transform uppercase. Follow us. Button class primary. So let's see here. Where are my button styles? Cursor, pointer. So it gives us that. We probably want an effect to at least slightly darken these. So we can say here, on hover, we want decrease opacity pop out. Let's see here. We probably want to transition, right? So let's do can never remember the order of properties. That's what gets me. And I hate using W3 schools as a reference, but it works. So we're going to transition background, opacity, color. I'm not sure if those need to be separated by spaces or not. So let's see here. 0.2 seconds. So we might need to say, because I think you can break down the transition, right? So specify multiple transition. Okay. Or transition property. There we go. Give this guy a little upvote. Thanks for your help. Color, text shadow. So we're going to care about background, color, opacity. Okay, and we're going to give these a transition duration. And we'll start out with 0.2 seconds. There has to be a shortcut to just auto-fix all these. There we go. And now that we're here, let's go ahead and just change those properties on hover, right? So let's do see what that looks like. So you can kind of see those fade out. Let's do, I wonder if that's obvious enough. These I have moved kind of from buttons to links. Let's go ahead and do this. So we're actually going to make this a router link. This is going to connect to a page that we have specified already. It's like a built-in view router thing. So it'll ultimately render to an A element. It's yelling to me because don't have an end matching tag. And this is going to be offsite, so I think you can do external router link, right? External link view. Let's double check. Wow, there are 7 people in here. Feel free to ask me to do anything, or if you have any questions. I'm not sure why you're all watching me on your lunch breaks, but I appreciate it. I wonder if their suggestion for using an external router link is to just use a normal anchor element. So we'll do router.vue.js.org. I'm just going to pull up the documentation for us. All right, PopLogix. Hopefully it's going well for you. I hope you get to eat today. I hope your slave drivers aren't driving you too hard. Router link 222. It looks like none of these are external. Yeah, renders 2. External. I'm not seeing anything, so we'll just use an anchor tag. Or this will take us to our channel on Twitch. Twitch.com. Let's get that channel URL. There we go. That's me. There we go. All right. Pop it in there. So we're going to have to drop the text decorations on these now that we've moved these to anchor elements. None. We've lost our vertical centering. So we can do, I want to say, display flex center text vertical flex. What is it? Justify a line item center, justify content center. So there we go. That should do it for us. It used to be a huge pain to center things vertically, and I feel like Flexbox has done a great job of making that easier, especially for text inside of containers. So we have About Us, and we have Follow Us. So that's just going to take us external, and it's going to take us to Twitch for now. And we're going to have that same call to action redundantly, at least for now, by that video. So we'll have that there as well. And About Us is taking us to About. So here's that page for right now. So you'll see that that kind of stays the same. And we'll do a transition where we roll this up and we fade out the video and this text. So we can play with that a little bit. Let's see. So we'll add a param to... So we might be able to move blue inside of all this, since it's kind of a consistent element for our top bar, and it kind of just goes away otherwise. So that's going to kill that blue. Cool, and add. And we're going to pull in top bar, nav class container. Yeah, we do the transitions with CSS. Even ultimately our SVG transitions are going to be using something similar to that. No, so we don't have, if we wanted really, really smooth transitions, there's something that Sarah Drasner recommends called, I think it's GreenSock, which helps with all of the really weird idiosyncrasies of trying to animate SVG elements and a couple of other different things, especially when it comes to morphing objects into other objects. So if you have like an SVG that has 1, 2, 3 points and they connect and they build the shape, and you want it to kind of animate into a star or morph into a star that has different points, so long as you provide those, like, here's the points that I want, here are the points that I have, here's how long I want it to take, you can apply a morph, and GreenSock can kind of just make it happen. There's a bunch of really cool code pens out there on it, so let's see. Code pen. But most of our stuff's pretty simple, so we're just going to rely on basic transitions. So here's one of the bigger ones. Right, so here's morph, where they're literally morphing some text, and this is all done with SVG, and it's something you can control pretty simply. Like, can you imagine trying to animate this by hand using CSS transitions? It's nuts, especially if you wanted it to be cross-browser compliant. So that you can see them there morphing those SVGs into different shapes that clearly have different paths and different points. And they provide a nice little code pen to show how they're doing it. And so they have, here's all the code that they're using to accomplish it. So it's a little bit of a bigger example, but it's still only about 200 lines of code. And then you have all of your SVGs here, which are usually made in an external SVG editor. But GreenSock usually helps with some of the more complex stuff. And there's some good tutorials out there on just accomplishing some of the more basic stuff. A collection of so here's a really simple one that kind of shows you these guys kind of following like a Bezier path and what it looks like, and being able to randomly generate that. There's a really simple GSock example, but yeah, but again, for the most part, we're just doing very simple transitions, so we don't need to leverage anything like that. We do have we update state, and that keys off of our transition. It makes it happen by changing a class, but that's as fancy as we get is in terms of JavaScript for making it happen. Okay, so let's move that into top bar. Yeah, now there's a ton of stuff you can do with GreenSock. That and 3DS are the big ones, I think. Or D3, sorry. For making some of those more advanced animations that are really just kind of mind-blowing. But you can do a lot. So, I mean, like my top code pen. Your pens. Why can't I get to it? Here we go. It's like you can animate a lot of stuff pretty simply. So here's one I have where you kind of have like SVG mountains that scroll across and they change in size depending on the width of your screen. You have like a filter that kind of provides like a background texture. Then you just have like a font overlaying everything right here that has this centered. But then you really just have all these stars. You're kind of, you know how I talked earlier about using Sass and kind of like iterating to create multiple of something. So we're creating many stars right here, I think using box shadow, and then having them animate up. And it kind of creates a really cool effect. So you really just have a gradient, some SVG mountains overlaying each other, and then like a texture to kind of give it kind of like a nice, just like dark, dusky night. But it's fairly simple. So like if you look at it, so what, 63 lines of HTML, and a lot of that is just the really simple SVG stuff that's drawing these triangle mountains and kind of placing them and overlaying them. Yeah, no, this is so this is my code pen. I think I pasted it. Yeah, I pasted a link to it. I have a mix-in for the star template, and then we create 3 different layers of stars that are different sizes. You'll see there's small, medium, and large stars, and they translate over top of each other for the essentially the height of the viewport. Then to JS, there's no JavaScript. It's literally just some information about when I made it in my website. So that's all CSS. Okay, back to this. So when I go to About, I want to know that I'm no longer on the About page. And so we're kind of already leveraging that. Where? So we have our store here, and it keeps track of the current page. And I think we were importing that at one point, but maybe we deleted it. About. Our About page is super simple. So I think we'll need app to actually watch that. So that'd be a computed prop. And it'd be, let's call it isNav collapsed. Becomes a method. We just need to return something. So this is, we're binding, and we're going to create a custom property on our CDD top bar, and it's going to get its value from this computed property here, which right now is always false. So top bar, add a new property, vprop, collapsed, boolean. In general, you kind of want all of your properties to be required unless you have a really good reason. Just because when you go back to write tests at a later point in time, if you don't have them required, it just gives you a lot more edge cases you need to test for. And a lot of times you have optional props for bad reasons, right? Where you don't supply a default, it can be kind of dangerous. Or like you decide that you want your one component to do like 15 different things, so you have a bunch of different optional props to give it different kinds of configuration. A lot of times that's an indicator that you actually just need more components. Split up that functionality and kind of make each of your components responsible for a single thing, that single responsibility principle. So we'll make collapsed true, and then we can queue a style off that. So we can do a class binding. And we can give a class of collapsed, and we can key that off of our collapsed value down there. Let's make sure that I'm doing that right. vbind requires an attribute value, vbind. Let's check view class binding, just to make sure I got the syntax. Class and style bindings, class active blank is active. So we just keep that as is. Looks like I'm just missing my end quotation. Good old typos. So now we just need to do something when it is collapsed, and we'll animate it so it's a little bit shorter. So many tabs. So let's go ahead and say computed, we'll do import map state from vuex, and then we'll map our state here. We'll use the spreader to map multiple properties. Well, again, if anyone has any questions or any point in time wants me to break things down a little bit further, feel free to ask. I know we just used map state for the first time. We're pulling in vuex, and some of you may not be familiar with what that is. And we're going to actually look at the map state syntax. Map state vuex. And so we're able to specify a couple different, so active page, we can say state. Look at our store. So we have a state of page, and that's going to give us a string that is string that kind of corresponds with the page that we're currently on, and that'll update. So isNav collapsed will be anytime that it is not, what's our default index? So this dot active page does not equal index. Let's see if that auto updates for us. So we have this blue, and it says it should be collapsed, and we're on the about page. If we navigate back, is that still the case? Ooh, so many windows. Oh, so that means we're having an issue. So we're using like the View Chrome plugin to kind of see what these different values are for us. So we can look at view X and just kind of see what it is at all times. So it looks like our default is actually home. So we'll use that. And then we can inspect the specific properties on that top bar component. Collapsed false, collapsed true, collapsed false, collapsed true. So that's updating properly. So now we just need to make sure that based off that style, we're animating appropriately. So top bar, we're going to want everything in this row to kind of fade out. So we'll be able to do a transition on that. And we're going to want the blue container to, I think, drop to like a height of 60 pixels or something similar to that. So we'll do blue. Collapsed. So when blue is collapsed, we want it to have a height of 60 pixels. And we want a padding bottom of 0. Let's try that out. So it tries to shrink it. We just have some issues here where we have some content that's kind of forcing it to be larger than it needs to be. We could do overflow hidden, but we shouldn't need it. So you'll see it kind of then kills everything that was there. Let's go 5. That's a little bit taller than I'd like. We're probably going to ultimately shrink these down a little bit because it's kind of large, especially for those mobile resolutions. All right, and then we're also going to want to transition on these, right? So transition property. So we're going to transition on height, which means we may need to set it. And on padding bottom, and that should be good. And then transition duration. 0.3 seconds. Apparently Prettier likes it if you have a little 0 there first. So you can kind of see that open and close now when we move to the about, but it's not as seamless as we'd like. Mainly because we have all this content down here that's going with it. So we might want to have like a transition delay to make sure that everything down here is kind of already faded out before we started that transition. So that way everything's not happening at once. So we'll do a transition delay. Let's see what that looks like. Something's still happening too fast for us. Let's just make it 2 seconds to really slow it down and see what's happening. It's definitely not delaying 2 seconds, tell you what. Something's delaying 2 seconds. And then it moves. And then it moves. So it looks like it might be the fact that we don't have height explicitly set. Pop Logics, eat some food. They can't make you work until you finish and just starve. I mean, if you don't eat, the project will never get done because you'll be dead. Oh. You didn't say eating, you said easing. Sorry, I thought you were literally starving over there. That's my bad. I have really tiny font in the bottom of that screen. Okay, transition. Timing function. Let's do ease. Maybe that's what you were talking about. But then I also want a height, but what's weird is our container doesn't have a static height. So it makes it a little bit hard to animate on that. And then we're also going to want to drop everything that's in here. So when this is collapsed, we want all of this to be gone too. But so we'll look at transition. View has transition element that kind of helps facilitate a lot of this. So we could do now that it's going to execute code as this enters and leaves, and we'll pop a v-if on the transition or the top level element. So we only really want this available if we're not collapsed. Okay, and then here's an example of what we could be using for the fade stylings. So let's pull this back in. So you'll see it kind of fade in and out, but what's happening is our height is jumping, and that's the issue. So it looks like that padding bottom is fine, but we don't have that height set. Alright, so I'm going to give this one more try, and if I don't fix it, that's fine. I'll just have to hop off for a little bit and see you all tomorrow. So let's see here. What if we transition on... does that fix it? No. Height, auto, CSS. And that's our issue, right? Is that content. Could use Flexbox. Let's see. Yep, this is our issue. 44 answers. 7 years ago. Alright. Let's see what that looks like. We'll change our transition property to max height. So this is probably going to have some weird side effects, because I imagine that would affect how fast it does that transform, right? It's getting a little bit smoother, so you can see there how it fades out. It jumps, though, when that content is gone. So maybe we need a min height as well. So this is a home page, about page, fades away, jumps, content slides up. Back to home, content fades in, slides down. Alright, so we'll play with this a little bit more using views transitions tomorrow at lunch. I think part of the issue, again, is that this content is just influencing the height of it. And we have that transition delay as well. So we need to find a way to kind of seamlessly kind of expand in and out of this. So maybe we just do overflow none. We don't fade this stuff out, or if we do, we don't care if it is entirely there or not. We might just do a v-show instead of a v-if. And we'll see if there's a good seamless way to make this less jumpy. And then I think that'll buy us a good transition to the about page, where we can start using our other page transitions where we move around those different user icons. But I think that's good for today. If you have any questions, feel free to tweet at me, email me, GitHub issue me, whatever works. So let's see here. Here is my Twitter account. I don't know how else to take offline messages for Twitch, or if there is kind of like a built-in messaging system or not. But Thanks for popping in today. Thanks for subscribing, Writer Dev. Always great to see you, Pop Logics. And I guess I'll see, hopefully, both of you tomorrow. All right.